Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I should have left Rachel Green's case buried in the cold files where it belonged. But 3 months after her disappearance from the Cascade National Forest, her mother's voice still haunted my dreams, and the sensation that something fundamentally wrong lurked in those woods never left my bones. It was October 15th, 2018, when I found myself parking my Ford Ranger at the same trailhead where Rachel had vanished. The morning air carried that crisp autumn bite that made your lungs ache, mixed with the earthy smell of decomposing leaves and something else. Something my sixth sense had been screaming about for months. My hands trembled slightly as I checked my gear. Motorola APX radio clipped to my shoulder. Garmin GPS unit showing coordinates 47.7211 degrees N, 120.7401 degrees W. My Glock 22 heavy against my hip, and a tactical flashlight that had seen too many dark corners. The call from Lieutenant Martinez had come at 5:47 a.m. Sullivan, we got a homeless camp reported 2 miles northeast of where the green girl went missing. Could be nothing, but he'd paused, and I could hear him breathing heavily. That family's been calling again. The mother's threatening to come up there herself if we don't reopen the case. Rachel Green, 22 years old, auburn hair, green eyes that sparkled in the missing person photos her mother clutched like prayer cards. She'd been doing graduate research on old-growth ecosystem recovery when she simply vanished from GPS coordinates 47.7331 degrees N, 120.7512 degrees W on July 18th. No blood, no struggle, no trace except for her backpack hanging from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground, something that still made the hair on my arms stand up. My radio crackled. Unit 47, this is base. What's your 20? Base Unit 47, I'm at the Green LKP beginning grid search northeast. Weather conditions clear, visibility good. My voice sounded steady, but my heart was already hammering against my ribs. That familiar electric tension was building in my spine, the same feeling I'd had before finding the Hartley boy's body 2 years ago, before discovering those ritualistic animal remains last spring. The trail wound through towering Douglas firs, their bark scarred with claw marks too high and too deep to be from any native animal. Pine needles crunched under my Danner boots, but between my footsteps I caught other sounds. Branches snapping in patterns that didn't match the wind, and underneath it all, a low humming that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. My wife Sarah had made me promise to be home by 6 p.m. for Emma's soccer game. "Daddy, you missed the last two," my 8-year-old had said, her gap-toothed smile twisting my heart. "Promise you won't miss this one?" I'd kissed her forehead and crossed my heart, but now, hiking deeper into these cursed woods, that promise felt like a lie waiting to happen. The homeless camp materialized like a wound in the forest. Tarps and cardboard held together with duct tape and desperation, surrounded by the sharp reek of unwashed humanity, and something else. Something that made my mouth taste like copper pennies. A figure hunched by a smoking fire pit looked up as I approached, and every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of Forest Service started screaming. "Sir? Forest Service. I need to ask you a few questions." The man was skeletal thin, with stringy gray hair and clothes that might have been any color before months of forest living. But his eyes, Jesus Christ, his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too aware, and when he smiled, showing teeth stained black with decay, my Glock felt suddenly inadequate. "Officer," he said, and his voice was like gravel in a blender. "I've been waiting for you." He stood slowly, and I caught the stench rolling off him. Not just body odor, but something putrid and sweet, like meat left too long in summer heat. "You're here about the girl?" My radio felt slippery in my sweating palm. "Unit 47 to base. I've made contact with a subject at coordinates 47.7298 degrees N, 120.7445 degrees W beginning interview." "Copy, Unit 47. Be advised, backup is 30 minutes out if needed." 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, a lot of people can die. What do you know about Rachel Green? I kept my voice level, but my hand drifted toward my service weapon. The man's grin widened, and I swear his canine teeth looked sharper than they should. Pretty little thing, smart too. She asked so many questions. He took a step closer, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Just like you're gonna ask questions. But I got something better than answers, Ranger Sullivan. I'd never told him my name. My vision narrowed, that familiar tunnel effect when adrenaline floods your system. Sir, I need you to stay where you are and keep your hands visible. But even as I spoke, he was moving with a fluidity that wasn't quite human, circling me like a predator. She screamed so pretty when I showed her what I really am, he whispered, and his voice seemed to come from all directions at once. Want to hear her voice? It's still echoing in my head. That's when he lunged. The thing that had been a homeless man moved faster than physics should allow, covering 8 feet in a blink. His fingers. God. Were those still fingers? Raked across my chest, shredding my uniform shirt and the flesh beneath like tissue paper. The pain was immediate and nauseating. Hot blood soaking my thermal underwear as I stumbled backward, drawing my Glock. Unit 47, shots fired. Officer needs assistance. I screamed into my radio while squeezing the trigger. The .40 caliber hollow points should have dropped him instantly. Instead, he laughed, a sound like breaking glass and crying children, as black blood that stank like sulfur spurted from the wounds. He backhanded me across the clearing, and I felt ribs crack as I slammed into a tree trunk. My radio went flying, landing somewhere in the underbrush with a satisfying crackle of breaking plastic. Stars exploded behind my eyes, but through the haze I saw him approaching, and the homeless man facade was melting away like candle wax. His limbs were stretching, joints bending in directions that made my stomach lurch. His skin took on a mottled gray color, and when he opened his mouth, I saw rows of teeth like broken razors. But worst of all were his eyes. They'd turned completely black, and in their depths, I could see Rachel Green screaming. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Jake Sullivan's situation? Comment below. The demon wearing a homeless man's skin grabbed my ankle and dragged me across the forest floor, my back scraping over rocks and broken branches. She's still alive, you know, it hissed, its voice now a harmony of the possessed man and something ancient and hungry. Part of her anyway, the part that can still feel pain. Desperation gave me strength I didn't know I had. I kicked out with my free leg, connecting with what I hoped was still a vulnerable spot. The thing howled, a sound that made every bird in a half-mile radius take flight, and released me long enough for me to roll away and fumble for my backup weapon, a folding knife clipped to my belt. But as I struggled to my feet, blood loss making me dizzy, I noticed something that chilled me more than the supernatural assault. Around the homeless camp, arranged in a careful circle, were personal items. A hiking boot that looked like Rachel's size, a broken iPhone with a cracked screen, a silver bracelet that caught the afternoon light, and hanging from a low branch, exactly like Rachel's backpack had been found, was a ranger's hat. My predecessor's hat. Jim Morrison had disappeared 3 years ago during a routine patrol. We'd assumed he'd fallen into one of the deep ravines, but now, Jim Morrison was just practice. The demon laughed, reading my expression. Rangers taste different than civilians, more seasoned. And you, Jake Sullivan, you taste like fear and failure. It rushed me again, but this time I was ready. Years of close quarters training kicked in, and I managed to get my knife between us. The blade sank into its chest with a wet, squelching sound, but instead of falling, the thing grabbed my wrist and twisted until I heard bones crack. The knife clattered to the ground as agony shot up my arm. But in that moment of contact, something else happened. My sixth sense, that intuitive awareness that had served me for years, suddenly exploded into overdrive. I could feel the demon's presence like ice water in my veins, but underneath it, I sensed something else. Rachel. She was still alive. Not just alive, conscious, trapped somewhere in the thing's psychic grip, experiencing every moment of horror. Emma's face flashed through my mind. Sarah making pancakes this morning. The promise to be home for the soccer game. If this thing killed me, how long before it found its way to town? How long before my family became its next victims? No, I growled through gritted teeth. Not today. My broken wrist screamed as I grabbed the fallen knife with my left hand. But instead of attacking the demon's body, I followed my instincts and drove the blade toward its forehead, aiming for the point between those horrible black eyes where I sensed Rachel's consciousness was trapped. The demon shrieked as the steel pierced its skull, and suddenly I was drowning in images. Rachel Green chained in an underground cavern somewhere in these mountains, the possessed vagrant performing rituals over her body, feeding on her terror while keeping her soul as a battery for his supernatural abilities. Jim Morrison's skeleton in the same cave, and dozens of others stretching back decades. The thing staggered backward, ichor pouring from the head wound, and for a moment its homeless man facade flickered back into place. "You can't kill me, Sullivan," it gasped. "I've been feeding on this forest since before your great-grandfather was born. I am the darkness between the trees." "Maybe," I panted, struggling to stay upright as shock set in. "But I know where she is now." GPS coordinates flooded my consciousness. 47.7156 degrees N, 120.7892 degrees W, an abandoned mine shaft 2 miles northwest. The demon realized what had happened. Our psychic contact had worked both ways and lunged for me with renewed fury. But I was already moving, my ranger training overriding pain and terror. I grabbed a burning branch from its fire pit and thrust it into the thing's face. It screamed and fell backward, thrashing as its stolen flesh began to burn with an unholy blue flame. "This isn't over," it shrieked as its human disguise melted away entirely, revealing something that looked like it had crawled out of humanity's deepest nightmares. "She's mine. They're all mine." I didn't wait to see what happened next. Clutching my broken wrist against my chest, I stumbled through the forest toward the coordinates burned into my mind. Behind me, the demon's death screams echoed through the trees, but I knew I was running out of time. If Rachel was still alive after 3 months in that creature's care, she wouldn't last much longer. The mineshaft entrance was hidden behind a curtain of thorny brush that tore at my already shredded uniform. But as I pulled aside the vegetation, the stench that rolled out nearly dropped me to my knees. Death and decay and something worse, the smell of souls in torment. My flashlight beam cut through absolute darkness, revealing a steep tunnel that disappeared into the earth. Somewhere down there, Rachel Green was waiting, and God knew what else. I keyed my backup radio, a small handheld I kept in my belt pack. Any unit. This is Jake Sullivan, Ranger 47. I've located what I believe to be the primary crime scene. Coordinates 47.7156 degrees N, 120.7892 degrees W. Abandoned mine shaft. Requesting immediate backup and medical. Static answered me. I was on my own. The descent into hell began with a single step. The tunnel walls were carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly, and the temperature dropped with every step I took deeper underground. My flashlight began to flicker, not from weak batteries, but from something that seemed to drain electrical energy from the air itself. But then I heard it, a weak voice, barely human after months of supernatural torture. "Help. Me." Rachel Green was alive, and I was going to bring her home or die trying. The final confrontation waited in a cavern that opened like a cathedral of nightmare. Ancient symbols covered every surface, glowing with their own sickly light. And there, in the center of a ritual circle carved into living rock, was Rachel, what the demon had done to her over 3 months. I pushed down the bile rising in my throat and focused on what mattered. Her eyes were open. She was conscious. She was alive. As I cut through her restraints with my recovered knife, Rachel whispered through cracked lips, "It's not dead. The fire, that was just its human host. It's coming. Behind us, something vast and ancient stirred in the deepest shadows of the cavern. The real demon, the thing that had been possessing human hosts for generations, began to emerge from wherever it had been waiting. But as I lifted Rachel in my arms, My wedding ring caught the supernatural light emanating from the ritual circle. Sarah, Emma. My family was waiting for me to come home, and I'd be damned, literally, if necessary, before I let this thing stop me. What happened in that cavern in the final battle between human love and demonic hunger is something I still see in my nightmares. But I emerged from that mine shaft carrying Rachel Green, both of us alive, both of us forever changed by what we'd witnessed. The demon is gone. I made sure of that, though the cost was higher than I ever imagined. Some victories leave scars that never heal. Some battles mark you in ways that can't be seen. I made it home in time for Emma's soccer game. She scored 2 goals, and Sarah kissed me despite the bandages and the haunted look in my eyes that I still can't shake. Rachel Green recovered mostly. She never talks about what happened during those 3 months, but sometimes I catch her staring into dark corners with the same expression I see in my own mirror. The Cascade National Forest is quiet now. The hikers and campers don't report strange sounds anymore. The animal remains have stopped appearing, but I still patrol those trails. Still listen for my radio to crackle with news of another disappearance. Because I learned something down in that demon's lair, something that keeps me awake at night. It wasn't alone. Somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, other ancient things are stirring. Other hungry shadows are choosing new hosts. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I carry Rachel Green's survival as both a triumph and a warning. The forest remembers everything, and some hungers never truly die. They just wait for the next ranger foolish enough to answer when the darkness calls. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Rachel Green during those 3 months. I read every single one. My name is Dylan Torres, and at 6:47 a.m. my radio crackled with the call that would change my life forever. Unit 23, we have a code yellow missing person at Blackwood Ridge National Forest. 22-year-old female Jordan Parker. Last seen yesterday evening around 1800 hours near the Old Summit Trail. Families requesting immediate search and rescue. Over. I was 3 sips into my morning coffee, still tasting the remnants of my wife Maria's goodbye kiss, when dispatch shattered the peaceful October morning. The steam from my cup caught the early sunlight filtering through our kitchen window, where Sophia's crayon drawings of our family still hung on the refrigerator. My 6-year-old had drawn me in my ranger uniform yesterday, complete with a crooked badge and a smile bigger than my head. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 23 responding. ETA 15 minutes over. Maria looked up from packing 8-year-old Miguel's lunch, concern already creasing her forehead. 15 years of marriage to a forest ranger had taught her to read the gravity in my voice. Missing person? Young woman, around Sophia's age when she grows up. I kissed Maria's temple, inhaling her familiar vanilla perfume. I'll be home for dinner. Promise. The words felt heavy leaving my mouth. I'd made that same promise 847 times in my 12-year career. This time something in my gut, that sixth sense you develop after pulling 3 bodies from these woods, whispered that I was lying. The 20-minute drive to Blackwood Ridge gave me time to review the preliminary details crackling through my radio. Jordan Parker, recent college graduate from Portland State, had come alone to the park for what her roommate called spiritual healing time after a rough breakup. She'd checked into Riverside Campground on Thursday, planning a 3-day solo hiking trip. Her mother had called 911 at 5:30 a.m. when Jordan failed to check in as promised. I knew these woods like the topography of Maria's sleeping face. Every ridge, every hidden creek, every place where cell towers couldn't penetrate the canopy. Blackwood Ridge stretched across 47,000 acres of Oregon's most unforgiving terrain, where Douglas firs grew so thick that GPS signals died and compasses spun like pinwheels in a hurricane. The parking area at Old Summit Trailhead was empty, except for a lonely silver Honda Civic bearing Oregon plates. JDP 847. Jordan's car. I ran the plates through my radio to confirm, then began my preliminary assessment. The vehicle was locked. No signs of struggle, registration, and insurance papers visible on the dashboard. Her camping gear was missing, suggesting she'd actually started her planned hike. But something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of squirrels in the underbrush, no distant drumming of woodpeckers. Even the flies seemed reluctant to buzz. In 12 years of ranger work, I'd learned that nature has a voice, and when it goes silent, it's usually screaming. I checked my gear. Motorola radio with fresh batteries, Garmin GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency shelter, 3 protein bars, 2 bottles of water. My service weapon, a Glock 22 that I'd never drawn in the line of duty, sat heavy on my hip. The temperature was dropping, 42 degrees and falling, with storm clouds building over the Cascade Peaks. Unit 23 to base. Beginning initial search pattern at Old Summit Trailhead. Coordinates 45.3728 north, 121.7089 west. Victim's vehicle located and secure. Commencing sign cutting along primary trail. Over. Copy, Unit 23. Weather Service reports possible snow flurries by 1400 hours. Keep us posted every 30 minutes. Over. Snow. In October. Maria would worry, and Miguel had a soccer game at 3 p.m. that I'd promised to attend. I pulled out my iPhone, 2 bars of signal here at the trailhead, and sent a quick text. Starting search, love you all, home for dinner. The Old Summit Trail began innocuously enough, a well-maintained path that wound upward through second-growth forest. Jordan's boot prints were easy to follow in the soft earth, size 7 hiking boots with distinctive waffle-pattern treads. She'd been walking steadily, no signs of panic or haste. But as I climbed higher, the forest began to change. The trees grew older, thicker, their branches interlocking overhead like arthritic fingers. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 100 yards. My breath started fogging and the hair on my forearms stood on end, not from cold but from something else, something that made my skin crawl and my pulse quicken. At the 2-mile mark, Jordan's trail veered off the main path. Her boot prints led down an unmaintained spur trail that I'd somehow never noticed in 12 years of patrolling this area. The path was nearly invisible, choked with blackberry vines and fallen logs, yet someone had clearly passed through recently. Broken branches at shoulder height, disturbed leaves, a scrap of blue fabric caught on a thorn bush. I keyed my radio. Unit 23 to base. Subject appears to have left main trail at marker 2.1. Following secondary path heading. I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly before settling on a direction that made no geographic sense. Heading southeast toward, I'm not sure. Terrain doesn't match my topographical map. Over. Copy, Unit 23. Proceed with caution. Check in every 15 minutes, over. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees were old-growth Douglas fir and western red cedar, some easily 300 years old. But this was supposed to be second-growth forest, clear-cut in the 1940s. My map showed no old-growth stands in this area. Yet here they stood, ancient giants that should have been stumps and sawdust decades ago. My iPhone lost signal entirely. The GPS unit kept flickering between coordinates that placed me in 3 different locations simultaneously. But Jordan's trail was clear, so I pressed on, marking my path with orange flagging tape every 50 yards. At 9:47 a.m., exactly 3 hours after that first radio call, I found her backpack. It hung from a branch 8 feet off the ground, as if Jordan had been lifted into the air and simply let go. The pack was intact, no tears or damage. But when I climbed up to retrieve it, my hands shook so badly I nearly fell twice. Inside, her wallet, iPhone, completely dead, wouldn't respond to charging cable, energy bars, water bottle still full, and a leather-bound journal. The final entry was dated yesterday, 6:42 p.m. Something's wrong with this place. The trees keep changing when I'm not looking directly at them. I swear I've been walking in circles, but my compass says I'm heading straight. Found an old building up ahead. Looks like a church. Maybe someone there can help me find the main trail. The walls are singing. That's impossible, but I can hear them. Hymns in a language I don't recognize. Below that, in increasingly frantic handwriting. The door won't open. Why won't the door open? I can hear children inside. Are they praying? Why are they screaming? The final line was barely legible, written in what looked like charcoal. They want me to come inside. They need me to complete the circle. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the journal. In 12 years of search and rescue, I'd seen hikers get lost, injured, killed by falls or hypothermia. But this was different. This was wrong in a way that made every survival instinct scream at me to run. Instead, I followed Jordan's trail deeper into the woods. The path led steadily downward into a valley that shouldn't exist. According to my topographical map, this area was a gentle ridge with no significant elevation change. Yet I was descending into a deep hollow where the air grew thick and oppressive, where the tree branches overhead wove together so tightly that they blocked out the sun. My radio crackled with static, cutting in and out. Unit, respond, you're 20. Base, this is Unit 23. I'm following the victim's trail into unmapped terrain. Radio signal breaking up. GPS malfunctioning. Continuing search. Over. No response except static that almost sounded like whispers. At 10:15 a.m. I saw the church. It squatted in a clearing like a diseased toad, its once white walls now stained gray-black with decades of rain and rot. The wooden structure was old, 1800s old, with a bell tower that leaned at an angle that should have brought it crashing down years ago. Gothic windows stared blindly into the forest, their glass long since shattered and replaced by darkness. But it was the sound that froze my blood. Singing. Dozens of voices, men, women, children, rising and falling in harmonies that made my teeth ache. The language was nothing I recognized, consonants that clicked and hissed like insects, vowels that seemed to echo inside my skull. And underneath the singing, a rhythmic thumping like a massive heartbeat, or like someone pounding on the inside of the church doors trying to get out. Jordan's trail led straight to the front entrance. I approached slowly, every nerve-ending screaming danger. The closer I got, the more details became visible. Symbols carved into the doorframe, not Christian crosses, but twisted shapes that hurt to look at directly. The wooden door itself was warped and water-stained, painted with something dark that might once have been red. And nailed to the door, exactly at eye level, was a missing person flyer with Jordan Parker's photograph. It was my flyer, the one I'd printed at the ranger station that morning, but that was impossible. I was the only one who had copies, and I hadn't been here before. I reached out with trembling fingers to touch the paper. The moment my skin made contact, the singing stopped. The silence was worse than the singing. I tried my radio, nothing but static. I tried shouting Jordan's name. The forest absorbed my voice like cotton. I tried backing away from the church, but my feet wouldn't obey. Something was pulling me forward, not physically, but mentally, like a fishhook lodged behind my eyes. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see flickering candlelight and hear that rhythmic thumping, slower now, like a dying heartbeat. I could smell something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a grave. And I could hear Jordan's voice, faint but unmistakable, calling my name. Dylan, help me. I can't get out. Every rational part of my mind screamed that this was a trap. But I was a forest ranger sworn to protect and serve. And somewhere in that cursed church, Jordan Parker needed my help. I pushed open the door. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Dylan Torres's situation? Comment below. The interior was a blasphemy of everything holy. Wooden pews faced a makeshift altar where something that definitely wasn't a cross cast writhing shadows on the far wall. Dozens of candles burned with flames that danced blue-green instead of orange-yellow, and covering every inch of the walls, ceiling, and floor were photographs. Hundreds of them, thousands. Missing person flyers, family photos, driver's license pictures, school portraits, men, women, children, elderly, all smiling at me from their paper prisons. Some of the faces were familiar from old cases I'd worked. Some were so faded and yellowed they must have been here for decades. And there, tacked to the wall directly above the altar, was a fresh Polaroid of me from this morning. drinking coffee in my kitchen while Maria packed lunches and Sophia colored at the table. You came. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of whispers that seemed to originate inside my own skull. We've been waiting so long for you to come. Jordan Parker stood in the shadows beside the altar. At least I thought it was Jordan. She had the right height, the right build, the right long brown hair. But her face was wrong. Too pale, too thin, with eyes that reflected the candlelight like an animal's. And when she smiled, I could see too many teeth. She's not real, I whispered, my voice cracking. You're not Jordan. I am everyone who has ever been lost. The thing wearing Jordan's face replied. Everyone who wandered too far from the path. Everyone who heard the singing and came to worship. More figures emerged from the shadows between the pews. Men, women, children, all wearing the faces from the photographs on the walls. All smiling with too many teeth. All reaching toward me with fingers that ended in sharp points. Your family is beautiful, Dylan, the Jordan thing said. Maria makes excellent coffee. Sophia draws lovely pictures. Miguel kicks the soccer ball with such enthusiasm. They would make wonderful additions to our congregation. The mention of my family shattered whatever paralysis held me. I lunged backward toward the door, but it had vanished. Solid wall where the entrance should have been, covered with more photographs, more missing faces, more families who would never know what happened to their loved ones. There's no leaving, Dylan. There never was. The moment you stepped off that trail, you entered our domain. Time moves differently here. Space bends to our will. Your radio calls for help went to no one. Your GPS coordinates led nowhere. You've been here for hours, days, weeks. Your family thinks you abandoned them. Search teams gave up looking. You're just another missing person now. I fumbled for my gun, but my holster was empty. My radio was gone. My GPS unit, my first aid kit, even my water bottles had vanished. I had nothing left but my wits and whatever was left of my courage. What do you want? I demanded. The same thing every church wants. The congregation of lost souls replied in unison. More believers. The candlelight began to strobe faster, the blue-green flames stretching toward the ceiling like grasping fingers. The photographs on the walls started to move, their subjects turning to stare at me with hungry eyes. And underneath it all, that rhythmic thumping grew louder and faster, like a massive heart preparing to burst. Join us, Dylan Torres. Let go of your fear, your doubt, your desperate love for a family that's already forgotten you. Accept the blessing of eternal worship. Become one with the song that never ends. The congregation began to sing again, that alien harmony that made reality blur at the edges. I felt my resistance crumbling, my memories of Maria and Sophia and Miguel growing distant and dreamlike. What was real? This church full of eternal worshipers, or some fantasy about a happy family life that my mind had conjured to protect itself? But then I felt something in my pocket, a folded piece of construction paper. Sophia's drawing from yesterday, the one she'd given me while I was getting ready for work. She'd insisted I take it with me for good luck, and I'd stuffed it in my uniform pocket without really looking. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the paper. It was our family drawn in crayon with all the innocent skill of a 6-year-old artist. Stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney. Daddy, Mommy, Sophia, and Miguel labeled carefully beneath each figure. And at the bottom, in Sophia's best handwriting, I love you, Daddy. Come home safe. The moment I saw those words, the church's power over me snapped. This was real. My family was real. The love in this simple drawing was more powerful than whatever malevolent force inhabited this cursed place. I was Dylan Torres, husband and father, and I had people waiting for me to come home. No, I shouted, holding the drawing above my head like a talisman. I reject your song. I reject your worship. I am not lost. The congregation hissed and recoiled as if I'd brandished a crucifix. The false Jordan's face twisted into something inhuman, all pretense of humanity falling away. The candles flared so bright I had to squeeze my eyes shut, and when I opened them again, I was standing outside the church in broad daylight. The building looked different now, older, more decayed, with holes in the roof and walls. Definitely abandoned, probably for decades. But most importantly, the door was open, and through it I could see nothing. Empty space. No pews, no altar, no photographs. Just 4 crumbling walls and a dirt floor scattered with dead leaves. And sitting in the center of the empty space, looking confused and terrified but very much alive, was the real Jordan Parker. "Oh my God," she gasped when she saw me. "Are you real? Please tell me you're real. I've been here for, I don't know how long. Hours? Days? I keep having these dreams about singing and candles and people who weren't people, but I couldn't wake up." I helped her to her feet, checking for injuries. Apart from dehydration and exhaustion, she appeared unharmed. "I'm Dylan Torres, Forest Ranger. Your family sent me to find you. You're going to be okay now." As we walked away from the cursed church, I turned back one last time. The building looked smaller now, less imposing. Just another abandoned relic slowly being reclaimed by the forest. But I swear I could still hear faint singing on the wind, and I knew that other searchers would come here someday, following other trails, looking for other missing people. Some would be strong enough to resist. Others. My radio crackled to life as we reached the main trail. "Unit 23, please respond. Your last check-in was over 6 hours ago. We have search teams mobilizing. What's your status?" 6 hours. It had felt like minutes and years simultaneously. "Base, this is Unit 23. Found the subject alive and conscious. We're heading back to the trailhead now. ETA 45 minutes. Over." "Copy that, Unit 23. Outstanding work. Medical team standing by. Over." We hiked out in comfortable silence. Jordan too exhausted to talk much and me too rattled to know where to begin. The forest felt normal again. Birds singing, squirrels chattering, the ordinary sounds of wilderness life. By the time we reached the parking area, I'd almost convinced myself that the whole experience had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Almost. But Sophia's drawing was still in my pocket, and when I showed it to Jordan as the EMTs checked her over, she smiled for the first time since I'd found her. "You have a beautiful family," she said. "Hold on to them tight." I drove home as the sun was setting, arriving just in time for dinner as promised. Maria kissed me at the door, Miguel showed me his math homework, and Sophia immediately wanted to hear about my adventure in the woods. I told them I'd helped find a lost hiker, which was true enough. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Maria and I sat on our back porch drinking wine and watching the stars. "Rough day?" she asked, noticing how tightly I was holding her hand. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm home now. That's what matters." I never spoke about what really happened in that cursed church. Jordan Parker never mentioned it either when she gave her statement, just said she'd gotten confused and lost track of time. The official report listed it as a routine search and rescue with a positive outcome. But sometimes, late at night when the wind is howling through the trees, I can still hear that alien singing. And sometimes, when I'm patrolling the far reaches of Blackwood Ridge, I catch glimpses of buildings that shouldn't be there. Structures that vanish when I look directly at them. The forest keeps its secrets, and some secrets are better left undisturbed. 3 months later, I put in for a transfer to a different ranger station. When they asked why, I told them I wanted to be closer to the kids' school. Another truth that wasn't quite the whole truth. I've been at Desert View Station for 2 years now, patrolling sagebrush and red rock country where the only things hiding in the shadows are coyotes and jackrabbits. My family loves it here. The kids are thriving. Maria got a better job, and I sleep through the night without dreaming of candlelight and singing. But I keep Sophia's drawing in my wallet, faded and worn from constant handling. Because I learned something important in that cursed church. Love is the most powerful force in any universe, natural or supernatural. It's the light that guides us home when all other navigation fails. And sometimes when the darkness seems too thick and the path ahead too uncertain, that's the only compass we need. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Jordan Parker in that cursed church. I read every single one. My name is Ryan Campbell, and I should have forgotten Sarah Chen's case, but something brought me back to that cursed forest. 3 months. That's how long it had been since Sarah Chen vanished without a trace from the Cascade Mountain trails. 3 months since her mother's voice cracked over the phone begging me not to give up. 3 months since the official search was called off and the case file got buried under newer emergencies. But the dreams wouldn't stop. Sarah's graduation photo haunting my sleep. Her mother's broken sobs echoing in my ranger station every goddamn morning. I should have been home with my wife Linda, helping our daughter Emma with her algebra homework. Instead, I was driving my 2018 Ford Ranger up the winding mountain road at 5:47 a.m., my Motorola APX 4000 radio crackling with early morning chatter from other units. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold hours ago, tasting like bitter regret and obsession. The October air bit through my Nomex uniform as I stepped out at the Whispering Pines trailhead, exactly where Sarah Chen had parked her Honda Civic on July 15th. My Garmin GPS showed coordinates 47.7211 degrees N, 121.1531 degrees W numbers burned into my memory like a brand. 23 years as a forest ranger, and I'd never had a case eat at me like this one. Sarah's scent trail had gone cold after the first mile marker, just disappeared, like she'd been plucked from the earth by invisible hands. The search dogs had whined and refused to continue past that exact spot, their hackles raised, something primal in their canine instincts, screaming danger. My Danner boots crunched through frost-brittle leaves as I followed the familiar trail, my tactical vest heavy with emergency gear. Medical kit, emergency blanket, protein bars, extra batteries for my Streamlight flashlight. The forest felt different this morning, too quiet, like nature itself was holding its breath. By mile marker 1.2 comma. My skin started crawling with that familiar sensation every veteran ranger learns to trust. The feeling of being watched. I keyed my radio. Unit 23 to dispatch, beginning grid search pattern Alpha in Sector 7. Static answered me. My radio signal should have been crystal clear at this elevation. That's when I smelled it. Something wrong mixed with the pine and morning dew. Metallic, organic, rotting. The smell got stronger as I pushed deeper into the underbrush, following a deer path that definitely wasn't on my topographical maps. My heart rate kicked up from its resting 68 BPM to somewhere north of 90. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold. That acrid fear sweat every ranger learns to recognize when nature stops being predictable. 50 yards off the main trail, hidden behind a massive fallen Douglas fir, I found something that made my stomach lurch. A pile of belongings, hiking boots, torn clothing, a water bottle with bite marks that looked human, but not random debris. Arranged, displayed. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my iPhone 8, the camera flash unnaturally bright in the growing shadows. That's when I noticed the strange wooden stakes driven into the ground in a perfect circle around the pile. Hand-carved symbols etched into each one, symbols that hurt to look at directly. Linda's voice echoed in my head from this morning. Ryan, honey, you need to let this go. Sarah Chen isn't your responsibility anymore. But standing there, staring at evidence that proved Sarah hadn't just wandered off and died of exposure, I knew I couldn't walk away. Something had taken her, something that was still out there. The GPS on my belt started malfunctioning, the screen flickering between my actual coordinates and impossible readings that placed me simultaneously in 3 different locations. My watch, a reliable Casio that had never failed me, stopped at exactly 7:13 a.m. That's when I heard the first scream, high-pitched, desperate, echoing from somewhere deep in the forest. Female, young. My veteran instincts kicked in, 23 years of training overriding the primal fear clawing at my gut. I grabbed my radio. Unit 23 requesting immediate backup at... Static. Dead static. The scream came again, closer, more desperate. Help me. Please, someone help me. The The voice was weak, terrified, coming from a ravine about 200 yards northwest. I crashed through the underbrush, thorns tearing at my uniform, my 200-lumen flashlight beam dancing wildly as I ran. But veteran rangers don't just react. We think. 23 years had taught me to trust my gut, and my gut was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. The voice was too perfect, too strategically placed to draw me away from the main trail. Sarah Chen's case file flashed through my memory. She was a smart girl, pre-med student at University of Washington. She wouldn't have wandered this far off trail without a damn good reason. I stopped running. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own labored breathing, could taste the metallic tang of adrenaline on my tongue. My heart hammered against my ribcage at 140 BPM. That's when I noticed the trees around me were wrong. Too uniformly spaced, branches trimmed at exact heights. This wasn't natural forest growth. This was a trap. Help me. Please. The voice was weaker now, more pitiful, coming from a depression in the ground about 30 feet ahead, hidden behind a screen of carefully arranged branches. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Ryan Campbell's situation? Comment below. I approached the depression with my sidearm drawn, a Glock 19 that felt pathetically inadequate against whatever was orchestrating this nightmare. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness, revealing a crude wooden platform suspended over what looked like a natural sinkhole. Ropes and pulleys, elaborate mechanical systems that spoke of intelligence and planning. And hanging from the center of that platform, suspended by her ankles, was Sarah Chen, or what was left of her. The thing wearing Sarah's face had been modified. Her limbs twisted at impossible angles, extra joints added where joints shouldn't exist. Her mouth had been widened into a permanent scream, lips sewn back to reveal too many teeth. But her eyes, Jesus Christ, her eyes were still human, still aware, still pleading for death. She's beautiful, isn't she? The voice came from behind me, calm, conversational, like we were discussing the weather. I spun around, my Glock raised, but saw only empty forest. 23 years as a ranger. The voice continued from a different direction. Impressive resume, Ryan Campbell. I've been watching you, studying you. You're going to be a magnificent addition to my collection. My tactical training kicked in. Don't panic. Control your breathing. Maintain situational awareness. But situational awareness becomes academic when reality starts bending around you like heated plastic. Sarah wasn't supposed to be found so quickly, the voice said, now coming from directly above me. I had such plans for her. But you're special, Ryan. A predator who spent decades learning to hunt in my territory. This will be educational. That's when I saw him. The bunker collector wasn't some supernatural entity. He was worse. He was human, maybe 60 years old, lean and wiry with the kind of strength that comes from decades of physical labor. His clothes were handmade from animal skins and human hair, stitched together with surgical precision. His face was a patchwork of different skin tones, as if he'd been rebuilding himself piece by piece. But his eyes were the worst part. Intelligent, patient, utterly, completely sane. I've been living in these woods for 47 years, he said, dropping from a tree branch with impossible silent grace. Building, planning, creating. The bunker took me 15 years to excavate by hand. The collection rooms took another 20 to perfect. You can't imagine the artistry involved in proper preservation. I fired 3 rounds center mass. The bullets hit him. I saw the impact, saw him stagger. But he smiled like I'd given him a gift. Ballistic trauma creates such interesting scarring patterns, he said, looking down at the spreading blood on his chest with professional interest. I'll incorporate these into your design, Ryan. Nothing goes to waste in my workshop. The platform beneath Sarah's suspended form began to lower into the sinkhole, operated by some mechanical system I couldn't see. Her muffled screams echoed up from the darkness, growing fainter as she disappeared into the earth. She's not dead, you know, the collector said conversationally, pressing one hand against his bullet wounds without apparent concern. Death is wasteful. I keep them alive as long as possible. Sarah's been conscious for 3 months, watching me work on the others, learning what's in store for her. My radio suddenly burst to life. Unit 23, what's your status? Ryan, come in, over. Linda's voice, tight with worry. The collector smiled. I can replicate any voice, any sound. 47 years of practice. Your wife Linda has such a lovely phone voice. I've been listening to your home calls through your cell phone for weeks. Did you know she's pregnant again? She hasn't told you yet. She's scared you'll want her to quit her job at the hospital. The information hit me like a physical blow. Linda, pregnant? How could this thing know something I didn't? 8 weeks along, he continued, tilting his head like a curious bird. She's been having morning sickness but hiding it, throwing up in the hospital bathroom between shifts. She wants to surprise you on your anniversary next month. Rage flooded my system, overriding fear and rationality. I charged him. 23 years of ranger training and 42 years of life condensed into pure violence. My fist connected with his patchwork face with a wet crack that echoed through the forest. He laughed. Excellent bone density, he said, spitting blood. You'll provide quality structural material. That's when I felt the ground give way beneath me. The forest floor was a false surface, carefully constructed vegetation covering a pit. I fell 12 feet into darkness, landing hard on something soft and yielding. My flashlight beam revealed what had broken my fall. A pile of partially decomposed bodies, some still wearing hiking gear, others in various states of the collector's artistic modification. Above me, the collector's face appeared at the rim of the pit, silhouetted against the gray morning sky. Welcome to my bunker's entrance, Ryan. You'll find the accommodations educational. The pit walls were lined with smooth concrete, no handholds, no way to climb out. But at the bottom, hidden behind the pile of bodies, was a steel door. My flashlight beam revealed a sophisticated airlock system, multiple locks, electronic keypads. This wasn't some wilderness psychopath's amateur hour. This was a facility. The steel door opened with a pneumatic hiss. Bright fluorescent light flooded out, temporarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, I was looking down a corridor that extended deep underground, lined with doors. Each door had a small window, and through those windows I could see faces. Living faces. Dozens of them. My collection, the collector's voice echoed through hidden speakers. 47 years of careful selection. Hikers, campers, researchers, other rangers. I choose only the finest specimens. People who will be missed, whose disappearances will create the most delicious grief. I walked down the corridor, my boots echoing on polished concrete. Behind each door, a person. Some were recent acquisitions, still healthy, still screaming. Others were modifications. Human bodies rebuilt according to the collector's artistic vision. Living sculptures of flesh and bone. Door 23 contained Sarah Chen. She was suspended in a clear tank filled with some kind of preservative fluid. Breathing apparatus connected to her nose and mouth. Her eyes tracked to me as I approached, wide with terror and something worse, hope. She's been asking for you, the collector's voice said. Every day for 3 months. Where's Ranger Campbell? He'll find me. He'll save me. Such touching faith. The door's electronic lock required a 6-digit code. I tried Sarah's birthday from her case file. Nothing. Her social security number. Nothing. Then, on pure instinct, I tried the coordinates where she disappeared. 471211. The lock clicked open. Sarah's preservation tank began draining as I entered. Her breathing apparatus retracted and she gasped her first unfiltered breath in 3 months. Ryan. Her voice was barely a whisper, throat raw from months of screaming. I'm getting you out of here, I said, working to disconnect the various tubes and wires keeping her alive. Can you walk? She nodded, but when I helped her stand, I saw what the collector had done to her legs. The bones had been systematically broken and reset at new angles, creating a grotesque walking mechanism that mimicked insect locomotion. She could move, but not like a human being. He wanted me to learn to dance, she whispered. Said he was teaching me a new way to be beautiful. That's when the corridor lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. The collector's voice echoed through the facility. You're contaminating my collection, Ryan. Sarah was nearly perfected. Now I'll have to start her modification process over. Sarah gripped my arm with desperate strength. There are others, she gasped. So many others. Some have been here for decades. We have to help them. But I could hear something moving in the darkness behind us. Multiple somethings. Shuffling footsteps, labored breathing, the scrape of modified limbs against concrete. Meet my earlier work, the collector announced. The unsuccessful experiments, the ones who didn't survive the modification process intact. They're hungry, Ryan. I don't feed them much. In the red emergency lighting, I could see them emerging from side passages, shapes that had once been human, rebuilt according to the collector's nightmare aesthetic. Some crawled on too many joints. Others had been given additional limbs, extra heads, redundant organs visible through surgical windows in their torsos. All of them were moving toward us with predatory intent. I fired my remaining rounds into the mass of approaching horrors, each bullet finding flesh with wet impact sounds that would haunt me forever. But there were too many, and bullets don't stop things that have been rebuilt to survive trauma. Sarah pointed down the corridor. Emergency exit, she gasped. I've been planning, watching, learning his systems. We ran through the underground facility, passing room after room of preserved victims. Some pounded on their windows as we passed, begging for rescue. Others just watched with dead eyes, too broken to hope anymore. The facility was massive. Surgical theaters, preservation labs, workshops filled with tools designed for the systematic modification of human beings. The collector hadn't just been killing people. He'd been perfecting them according to his insane vision. The emergency exit was a ladder leading up to a concealed hatch in the forest floor. But as we climbed, I could hear him following us, his modified victims shambling behind in a grotesque parade. We burst out of the hatch into morning sunlight that felt like salvation. My radio suddenly crackled to life, real contact with the outside world. Unit 23, this is dispatch. We have search teams en route to your last known coordinates. But the collector wasn't finished with us. He emerged from the hatch like something birthed from the earth itself. His bullet wounds already partially healed with surgical sutures, his patchwork face twisted into an expression of artistic disappointment. You're ruining 47 years of work, he said sadly. I'll have to relocate the entire facility, start the collection over. But first, I need to complete Sarah's modification and add you to the family. That's when I saw the syringe in his hand, something that would paralyze us but keep us conscious for the modification process. Sarah grabbed a fallen branch and swung it with desperate strength, connecting with the collector's reconstructed skull. He staggered but didn't fall. Run, she gasped. I can't. My legs. Just run. But 23 years as a ranger had taught me something the collector hadn't counted on. I knew these woods better than any map, better than any predator, and I knew where the old mine shafts were located. I grabbed Sarah and half-carried her toward the unstable ground I'd been warning hikers about for years. The collector followed, moving with inhuman persistence, his modified victims emerging from the bunker behind him. At the edge of the mine shaft, I made a choice that would haunt me forever. I threw my emergency flare directly into the collector's face, the phosphorus igniting his patchwork skin like a chemical fire. He screamed, the first human sound he'd made, and stumbled backward into the collapsing mine entrance. The ground gave way, taking him and most of his collection of horrors down into the abandoned depths. But not all of them. Sarah and I limped toward the sound of approaching helicopters, leaving behind an underground facility filled with victims I couldn't save. The collector might be gone, but his work remained. Dozens of people who would need medical care, psychological support, and a chance to rebuild their humanity. The official report listed it as a rescue operation that uncovered a serial killer's underground facility. The collector's body was never found in the mine collapse, Neither were most of his victims, but I know he's still down there, somewhere in the darkness, starting his collection over again. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Sarah Chen. I read every single one. Sarah recovered mostly. She walks with a limp and can't sleep without lights on, but she's alive. She finished medical school, specializes in trauma surgery now. Says she wants to fix what broken people did to other broken people. My wife Linda gave birth to our son Michael 8 months later. I never told her how I knew about the pregnancy. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that voice in the woods. Patient, intelligent, planning. 47 years, Ryan Campbell. But I have all the time in the world to start again. The end. My name is Sam Jackson, and at 6:47 a.m. my radio crackled with the call that would change my life. Unit 23, we have a code yellow. Missing hiker reported at Cascade National Forest. 22-year-old male, Connor Walsh. Family called it in 20 minutes ago. Last contact was yesterday evening around 1800 hours. I fumbled with my coffee, nearly spilling it across my dashboard. 3 months into this job, and this was my first solo missing person case. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio, hoping my voice wouldn't crack. Unit 23, copy that. What's my assignment? Meet the family at the Pine Ridge trailhead. Get the details, coordinate initial search. Backup units are 30 minutes out due to the Morrison Creek incident. 30 minutes. I'd be alone with a panicked family, trying to look like I knew what I was doing. The metallic taste of fear coated my tongue as I started my truck. This was exactly what I'd trained for, what I'd dreamed about since I was a kid watching those search and rescue documentaries. Time to prove I belonged here. The Walsh family was waiting when I arrived. 3 people huddled around a red Honda Civic, their breath visible in the crisp October morning air. Mrs. Walsh rushed toward me before I'd even shut my truck door, her eyes swollen and red. Please, you have to find him. Connor's never done anything like this. He calls me every few hours when he's hiking. Always. Something's wrong. Her voice cracked, and I felt the weight of her desperation settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Mr. Walsh stepped forward, calmer, but with worry etched deep in his face. Officer, Connor left yesterday morning for a day hike. Said he'd be back by dark. When he didn't come home, we drove out here. Found his car, but he gestured helplessly toward the empty parking area. Their daughter, maybe 16, stood apart with her arms wrapped around herself. He wouldn't just disappear, she whispered. Connor's responsible. He's the responsible one. I pulled out my notebook, trying to remember everything from my training. Details. I needed details. What was Connor wearing? What equipment did he have? Blue North Face jacket, black hiking boots, gray backpack. Mrs. Walsh rattled off. He had his phone, water, energy bars. He's done this trail a dozen times. I scribbled everything down, my pen trembling slightly. Any specific section of trail he preferred? The upper loop, Mr. Walsh said. He likes the view from Eagles Point. Takes pictures there. Eagles Point. I'd been there during training. A rocky outcrop about 4 miles in with cell phone coverage spotty at best. If Connor had gotten hurt up there. We'll find him, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm going to start at the trailhead, follow his most likely route. More rangers are coming. Mrs. Walsh grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in through my jacket. Promise me. Promise you'll bring him home. The intensity in her eyes made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her I was new, that I might screw this up, that she deserved someone with experience. Instead, I nodded. I promise. 45 minutes later, I was 3 miles into the Cascade Trail, following boot prints that matched Connor's size 11 Merrells. The forest felt different than usual, quieter somehow, like even the birds were holding their breath. October in the Cascades was usually alive with sound. Squirrels chattering, leaves rustling. distant bird calls echoing through the pine canopy. Today, nothing. My radio crackled with periodic check-ins from base, each static-filled exchange a reminder of how alone I was out here. Unit 23, status report. Still tracking, found clear boot prints heading toward Eagles Point, no sign of distress yet. But that wasn't entirely true. Something felt wrong, had felt wrong since I'd started hiking. Call it rookie paranoia, but the wrongness pressed against my chest like a physical weight. The trees seemed to lean in too close. The shadows fell at odd angles despite the morning sun. Even my own footsteps sounded muffled as if the forest was swallowing every noise. At mile 4, I found Connor's first mistake. His boot prints veered left off the main trail, following what looked like a game path winding deeper into the dense timber. I knelt down, studying the impressions in the soft earth. No signs of a struggle, no scuffed dirt or broken branches. He'd chosen to go this way. But why? The game trail led away from Eagles Point, away from any marked destination. It disappeared into a tangle of old-growth forest that even experienced hikers avoided. I keyed my radio. Base, Unit 23, found tracks diverging from main trail at grid coordinates 47.7421, minus 121.1532. Subject appears to have left trail voluntarily. Copy that. Any indication why? I studied the ground again, looking for anything I might have missed in my training. Then I saw them. 2 more sets of prints, smaller than Connor's but fresh. Adult tracks, heading in the same direction. Base, I've got additional boot prints. Looks like subject may have encountered other hikers. 3 sets of tracks total, all heading southeast into unmarked territory. Roger. Continue tracking, but maintain radio contact every 15 minutes. The game trail wound through increasingly dense forest, past massive Douglas firs that blocked most of the sunlight. My breathing grew shallow as the wrongness intensified. Every shadow seemed to shift in my peripheral vision. Every crack of a twig made me spin around, heart hammering against my ribs. After an hour of tracking, I heard voices ahead. Real voices, not the phantom whispers my paranoid brain had been manufacturing for the last mile. I crept forward, staying low behind a massive fallen log, and peered through the undergrowth. 20 yards ahead, in a small clearing, stood a man and woman. They looked to be in their 50s, dressed in clean hiking clothes that seemed oddly pristine for people who'd been walking through the forest. The woman had graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she was smiling at something the man was saying. Normal hikers. Relief flooded through me. But where was Connor? I stood up and called out, "Excuse me, Forest Service." They turned toward me with expressions of surprise and concern. The woman hurried over, her face creased with worry. "Oh, thank goodness, a ranger. We've been so worried. We found a young man about an hour ago. He seemed disoriented, maybe dehydrated. We're trying to help him get back to safety." My pulse quickened. Connor Walsh? 22, blue North Face jacket? Yes, that's him. Poor thing was stumbling around, completely lost. We gave him some water, got him sitting down to rest. The man approached, extending his hand. "Tom Bradley. This is my wife, Martha. We've been hiking these trails for 20 years. When we saw that boy in trouble, we couldn't just leave him." I shook Tom's hand, noting how soft his palm was. Not the calloused grip of someone who'd been hiking for decades. But relief overrode my suspicion. I'd found Connor. The family would be so grateful. "Where is he now?" I asked. Martha pointed toward a narrow path leading out of the clearing. "We have a cabin about half a mile that way. Tom carried him there. The poor thing could barely walk. Probably heat exhaustion, even in this cool weather. Happens more than you'd think." If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Sam Jackson's situation? Comment below. Something cold crawled up my spine. Heat exhaustion, in 60-degree weather, and why would they take Connor to their cabin instead of helping him back to the trail? But these seemed like normal people, concerned hikers who'd found someone in trouble. "I should radio this in," I said, reaching for my walkie. "Oh, there's no signal from our place," Tom said quickly. "We tried calling for help ourselves. The cabin's in a dead zone, but it's warm and dry, and Martha's a retired nurse. She's been taking good care of him." A retired nurse. That made sense. I was overthinking this. Rookie nerves making me paranoid when I should be grateful these good people had helped Connor. "Lead the way," I said. We walked single file down the narrow path, Tom in front, then Martha, with me bringing up the rear. The trees pressed closer here, their branches forming a canopy so thick that it felt like twilight despite being mid-morning. My radio produced only static when I tried to check in. "How did you find Connor?" I asked, partly to fill the oppressive silence and partly because something still felt off. "We heard him calling for help," Martha said over her shoulder. "Sounded like he'd been wandering in circles for hours. Poor thing was almost crying when we found him. That didn't sound like the Connor his family had described, experienced, responsible, someone who'd hiked these trails many times. But people got disoriented in the woods. It happened to everyone eventually. The path seemed to go on longer than half a mile. My watch showed we'd been walking for 25 minutes, and my sense of direction, usually pretty good, was completely scrambled. The trees all looked the same, massive and ancient, their trunks disappearing into shadows above and below. "How much further?" I called out. "Just around this bend," Tom replied, but his voice sounded strange, muffled like he was speaking through cotton. We rounded the bend, and there it was, a small log cabin nestled among the trees, with smoke curling from its chimney. It looked rustic and welcoming, exactly the kind of place you'd want to find if you were lost and exhausted. Carved wooden wind chimes hung from the porch eaves, tinkling softly in the breeze. But something was wrong with the wind chimes. The breeze wasn't moving the trees at all. Their branches hung perfectly still. Yet the chimes kept tinkling, a discordant melody that made my teeth ache. "Connor's inside resting," Martha said, climbing the porch steps. "He was so relieved when we told him help was coming." I followed them to the door, my hand instinctively moving toward my radio even though I knew it wouldn't work here. Tom opened the door and warm air flowed out, carrying the scent of coffee and something else, something sweet and cloying that made my stomach turn. "Connor," I called out as I stepped inside. "Connor Walsh? I'm with Forest Service. Your family sent me." The interior of the cabin was cozy, with handmade furniture and Native American rugs covering the wooden floors. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Everything looked normal, welcoming even, except there was no Connor. Where is he? I turned to face Tom and Martha, and the hair on my arm stood up. They were both smiling at me, but their smiles were wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. "Oh, Connor's safe," Martha said, her voice taking on a sing-song quality that hadn't been there before. "He's exactly where he needs to be." Tom moved to block the door, and I noticed how much larger he looked now, broader, more imposing. "You must be tired from all that walking, Ranger. Why don't you sit down? Have some coffee?" My heart began hammering against my ribs. Every instinct I had was screaming danger, but I forced myself to stay calm. These were just concerned hikers. I was being paranoid, letting my imagination run wild. "I need to see Connor first," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "His family is worried sick." "Of course they are," Martha cooed, moving closer. "Poor things. They love him so much. That kind of love is powerful, useful." The wrongness crashed over me like a wave. The sweet smell was stronger now, and I realized what it was. Incense, the kind burned in churches. But underneath it was something else, something that made my gorge rise. Where is Connor? Tom's smile stretched even wider, and in the firelight his teeth looked sharp. He's contributing to something greater than himself, something beautiful. We've been waiting so long for someone like him, young, loved, missed. His family's desperation feeds the ritual so perfectly. Ritual? The word came out as a croak. Martha clapped her hands together, delighted. "Oh, it's wonderful. We've been practicing for decades, perfecting our craft. Connor's energy, combined with his family's anguish." She shivered with pleasure. It's like a battery, powering something magnificent. I backed toward what I hoped was a window, but the walls seemed to have shifted. The cabin was larger inside than it had looked from outside, stretching back into shadows that the firelight couldn't penetrate. "You're insane," I whispered. "Are we?" Tom tilted his head, and in the flickering light, his face looked different, older, more angular, with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "We offered help to a lost hiker. We provided shelter and comfort. We're going to help you too, Ranger Jackson." They knew my name. I'd never told them my name. "We know all about you, Samuel," Martha purred. "New on the job, eager to prove yourself. Your parents are so proud of their boy becoming a ranger. Your girlfriend Sarah keeps texting, wondering when you'll propose. So much love surrounding you, so much potential." My phone was in my pocket, but when I reached for it, the screen was black, dead, even though I'd charged it fully that morning. "Technology fails in places of power," Tom said, as if reading my thoughts. "But don't worry, you won't need it where you're going." "Connor!" I shouted, hoping he could hear me. "Connor, where are you?" "He can't answer," Martha said sadly. "The ritual requires silence from the participants, but he's very much alive. We need them alive for it to work properly. The fear, the hope, the gradual understanding of what's happening, it all adds to the energy." I ran. Somehow, I found a door and burst through it, stumbling into what looked like the cabin's backyard. But it wasn't a yard. It was a circular clearing surrounded by trees that stretched impossibly high, their tops lost in a sky that had turned the color of old blood. In the center of the clearing stood a wooden structure that hurt to look at directly. It wasn't quite a cross, wasn't quite a cage, but something in between. And suspended from it, very much alive but unable to speak through the gag in his mouth, was Connor Walsh. His eyes found mine, wide with terror and relief and desperate hope. He was trying to tell me something, jerking his head toward the trees, but I couldn't understand. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Tom's voice came from right behind me, though I hadn't heard him approach. 23 years we've been perfecting the design. The angles have to be precise for the energy to flow properly. "Let him go." I spun around to face them, my hand moving to my service weapon. "I'm a federal officer. Let him go now." Martha laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You sweet boy, do you think your little gun will help you here? This is a place outside normal rules, outside normal reality." She was right. When I tried to draw my weapon, my hand passed through empty air. The holster was still there, but the gun was gone, as if it had never existed. "The ritual will begin at sunset," Tom said, checking a pocket watch that definitely hadn't been there before. "Connor's family is driving themselves mad with worry. His sister is posting on social media begging for any information. His mother hasn't slept. Their anguish grows stronger by the hour, feeding our work. What do you want?" "We want what everyone wants," Martha said. "Power, purpose, the ability to shape reality according to our will. Connor will help us achieve that, and so will you." Another wooden structure was rising from the ground beside Connor's, growing upward like a twisted plant. For me, I ran again, crashing through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and face. Behind me I could hear Tom and Martha laughing, but they weren't chasing me. They didn't need to. Every path I took led me in a circle, back to the clearing, back to Connor's terrified eyes and the structure waiting for me. On my fourth attempt to escape, I stopped running and started thinking. I was a ranger. I'd trained for this. Not the supernatural part, obviously, but for finding my way out of places when everything seemed hopeless. The sun. Even in this wrong place, there had to be a sun. I looked up through the canopy and found it, a pale disk barely visible through the blood-colored sky. It was setting, which meant I'd been here much longer than I'd thought. But it also meant I could find west. I picked a direction and walked, not running this time. Steady, deliberate movement, ignoring the whispers in the trees and the glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. When the path tried to turn me around, I left it entirely, pushing through thick undergrowth, following the sun. The forest fought me. Branches grabbed at my clothes like grasping fingers. Roots rose up to trip me. The ground turned swampy, then rocky, then disappeared entirely under a layer of dead leaves that might have been hiding anything. But I kept walking. Finally, after what felt like hours, the wrongness began to fade. The trees gradually returned to normal colors. The sky lightened from blood red to gray. My radio crackled to life. Unit 23, come in. Unit 23, what's your status? I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. Base, this is Unit 23. I need immediate backup at grid coordinates. I looked at my GPS, but the numbers were fluctuating wildly. I need backup. Officer in distress. Civilian in immediate danger. Copy that, 23. Nature of distress. How could I explain? That I'd found Connor Walsh in the hands of people who practice supernatural rituals. That they'd tried to trap me in some kind of pocket dimension. That reality itself had become unreliable. Armed suspects holding Connor Walsh. Request immediate assistance, multiple units. Roger. Units 15 and 7 en route. Stay on channel. I kept walking, following my GPS as it slowly stabilized, leading me back toward the main trail. Every few minutes I checked in with base, providing coordinates, staying connected to the normal world. It took 3 hours and 6 rangers to find the cabin. When we did, it was empty. Just a normal hunting cabin that looked like it hadn't been used in years. No Tom and Martha. No ritual structures. No signs that anyone had been there recently. But we found Connor's backpack in the woods behind the cabin. His phone was still in it, along with his water and energy bars, everything his mother had said he'd carried. The search continued for 2 weeks. We brought in dogs, helicopters, search and rescue volunteers. We combed every square mile of that forest. Connor Walsh seemed to have simply vanished. His family still calls me sometimes. Mrs. Walsh mostly, asking if there are any new leads, any new theories. I always tell her we haven't given up, that missing persons cases sometimes break open months or even years later. But I never tell her what I really think, that Connor is still out there somewhere between normal reality and something else. Still alive, because they need him alive. Still hoping for rescue that will never come. I never tell her about the dreams either. The ones where I see Connor suspended in that terrible structure, watching the sun set over a forest that exists in no atlas, are the dreams where Tom and Martha visit me, smiling their 2 wide smiles, telling me they're patient people and they'll wait as long as necessary. I've requested a transfer to a different forest, 3 times. Each request has been lost in bureaucratic paperwork, misplaced or accidentally deleted. I think they want me to stay. I think I'm still part of their ritual somehow. The ranger who got away, who knows the truth but can never prove it. My knowledge and my helplessness feeding their work just like Connor's family's anguish. Sometimes, hiking alone in the forest, I hear wind chimes tinkling in the distance, even when there's no breeze. I always walk in the opposite direction. But lately I've been wondering, what if there is no opposite direction anymore? What if every path eventually leads back to that clearing, to that cabin, to Tom and Martha's patient smiles? What if I never actually escaped at all? My name is Sam Jackson, and I'm a forest ranger in the Cascade National Forest, at least I think I am. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Connor Walsh. I read every single one.